There's a big difference between understanding something because you read it in a textbook or having gained that understanding through experience. I'm going to dive into how that applies in real life here. All right, guys, straight into it. So, obviously, we're going to talk about the difference between an intellectual understanding and an experiential understanding. I think that these are important concepts. There are obviously huge differences between the two. You can understand something intellectually and have an idea and pretty much have an almost full understanding of it from very brief study or review, right? But in order for that same, I'm going to use an example here shortly, but in order for that same subject to stick with you in a meaningful and more impactful way, experience is necessary, okay? So I'm going to take shooting the basketball, for example, okay? When you're shooting the basketball, right, there are some key concepts to understand. You know, you can load your wrist, get your elbow to the basket squared, and release off your index finger, and have your feet square, hip square, shoulder square, all that kind of stuff, right? It doesn't take a genius to figure that out by looking at YouTube and whatever, right? But in order to actually shoot the basketball and put it in the basket properly, just knowing these cues is not good enough. You have to have experience and repetition doing that. Now, that's a physical task, okay? But I would argue this holds true for even mental pursuits as well. Let's take being a lawyer, for example, okay? There is, I've done some legal work for myself and represented myself in court before, and for whether I'm suing somebody or whether I'm on trial or whatever, right? In circumstances like that, like if you represent yourself, yes, you can likely figure out the ins and outs of your specific law that you're dealing with and basically be able to represent yourself pretty well. But then there's also the experiential side of how a judge may be affected by hearing certain information, how the court may perceive certain things, whether to go, little details where only a really experienced lawyer is going to have that advantage. And that's an experiential understanding of the same law, right? How to display certain things from experience. Hey, this has happened before. This is more innately within me as muscle memory than it is to intellectually understand something. Let's go back to the jump shot example, right? If your jump shot is, you're working on your jump shot and you're putting up, mad shots and whatnot, and you have your form down, and you just started, but you've basically done a lot of study on the form and your mechanics are good and everything like that, right? A truly great shooter is not that focused on their mechanics. I'm sure there was a time when they were, but I've been shooting quite a bit for a long time and trying to get better at my shot. And I would consider myself a pro level shooter. Not NBA, but I think I could shoot at a pro level, okay? I'm good with the 4-pointers and 5-pointers. I have range. I can shoot off the dribble, off movement. I've been working on a lot of different stuff. Now, the thing you realize when you start to shoot and actually work on your shot is that it's not that critical if you know mechanics or not. It's more about getting the shots up, right? You put your shots up and you start to learn how your body feels and when you got a good shot off, what to do to make sure you get a good shot, how to train properly. Training shooting 7 days a week is not a good idea. You actually tend to regress when you do stuff like that. Because it's like, you start to build bad patterns and stuff like that. You need your brain needs time to calibrate and kind of learn what it just practiced and prune neural pathways and stuff. That's something you gain from experience. I used to shoot 1,000 shots twice a week thinking that, hey, I'm going to be a great shooter. And I plateaued doing that. Intellectually, I couldn't have possibly understood why that was. Experientially, I started to get fatigued after shot 600, 550. I'm shooting NBA threes. I mean, these are deep shots, right? The wrist starts to get hurt. And your legs start to get tired if you're bending your knees properly and stuff like that. And then you start compensating in these weird ways, and it actually hurts your shot to shoot beyond that, in my opinion, if you ask me, especially those deep shots, right? So that's an experiential understanding. Now I'll be in the gym and I'll listen to my body. All right, I'm 400 shots in. I've been shooting off the dribble and off movement. 400 doesn't sound like a lot. I used to shoot 1,000. But, hey, at this point, I know, right? This is where I'm going to start reaching diminishing returns and perhaps hurt myself. I know that innately through experience. My intellect about how to put the ball in the basket properly is not going to apply. It's not going to help me, right? So that's one example. Another is, there are these. This exists everywhere, right? Anything we do, there's a large difference between an intellectual understanding. That's kind of a surface level. Yes, you might have all the details down in memory, and you might know it, and you might get it. Okay, but it's still a surface level understanding. It doesn't come naturally to you. It's not. It's not something that you just know when you're in a situation, faced with a situation where you have to make a decision. And experiential understanding is something that you just know. You have a feeling about it. They say this in finance as well. A good trader is not. They're not. They're more just eyeballing stuff and from understanding and like knowing. They've had the intellectual understanding for a long time, but they're just looking at certain metrics, like looking at these ratios and saying, okay, look, if this goes here, if this RSI indicator crosses here, then that means that, hey, we are, with this and this company's cash flows and this all considered, this is a buy. No, this is going to be a sell. They're not sitting here doing the calculus on every single decision. At some point, you kind of leave that behind. And that's something that in my journey of coaching basketball that I've actually come to understand as well. There are certain things you can only feel in the moment as a coach and put into practice, and that's an experience thing. That is not an intellect thing. Yeah, you might know, right, that if you're facing a 2-3, going with an odd man front and putting a guy in the high post is going to beat the 2-3, but you're also not going to that stuff. You'll know it's intellectual understanding, and for a long time I thought, hey, I'm really smart, I know this shit. But there's certain things when it comes to coaching that require an experience. Just understanding the flow of the game, feeling your team's energy and your morale, knowing what to do, knowing when to go to your strengths, when to try to play strategically and control the game, when to play fast, when to slow it down, when to call timeout, how to control the vibe, the energy of the whole stadium, the whole area, the whole thing that you're in, right? That comes from experience. So I just wanted to break that down and give a couple examples, right? An intellectual versus an experiential understanding. Crucial difference, obviously. Okay, it's they're worlds apart. I was a performance trainer for a long time, and I had a great intellectual understanding, but I thrived on experiential understanding. I had an ISSA. I worked with people that were NASM and CSCS and had better credentials than me for sure. But I had experience. I played for essentially a prep football team in high school, and my coach was one of the best coaches there was in Virginia, the state of Virginia, probably one of the best in the history of the state, right? I learned everything I know about weight training from that football program and the coaches he chose to have around, the coaches and his methods. So that was very valuable to me, and I felt that I was able to create more improvements and more strength gains, especially, but really overall improvements across the board, explosiveness and everything, because of that than I could have ever done because of a certification. A certification is not going to teach me, how to energize a weight room and how to get big. You know what I'm saying? There's just no. You got to do that. You got to put the work in. I Zercher deadlift 225 pounds by 8. Okay, so you know what I'm saying? Like that's just like diesel. That's I earned that. I worked my way up to that level. So people like kids who high school kids I trained are gonna look at that and be like, okay, I'm gonna listen to this guy, and they're gonna have more respect for what I have going on, because at the end of the day, I've walked the walk in the weight room. I'm not fucking Larry Wheels, right? But for a natty, I'm pretty fucking good. I'm pretty strong. I'm a strong guy, and I'm a very versatile strong guy. I'm very good across all lifts. I'm not overly specialized in one, and also I know how to make that translate to sport. So, I mean, it's just a conversation I wanted to have about the difference, and a lot of people, I don't think this is a topic that's talked about enough, but I think that this applies in a myriad of facets and walks of life. So yeah, man, intellectual versus experiential understanding. Let me know what you guys think about this subject, and if you think one's better than the other. I think they're both very useful and can be applied differently, but I think the experiential understanding is more important in my mind. Like, comment, and subscribe, okay, for more takes, and peace and love, y'all.